Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the first episode of the Critical Line Network, where insight meets analysis. I am your host and creator, IBK. Listen, y'all, this is exciting. Why? Because this show is all about leadership and Americans. And when you bring the two together, what do you get? All right, you know what you get, right? The truth. Because Americans have one perspective, leaders have another. But when you get it all out, the truth comes out. So, my show for today is going to start off with leadership, of course, because why? Leadership is important. And because of all of the events that are going on in our country right now today, why not start out with leadership? And the topic of today is going to be the cost of leadership. What does it cost a leader to stand up for the truth? That's today's episode. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Okay, now let's dive right in. Now, I want to start off with a quote that has to do with leadership. This particular quote is by Miss Erica James. She is the Dean of the Wharton School of Pennsylvania. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the beginning of her quote, and then towards the end of the show, I want to reiterate her entire quote that you can see how it fully fits in and what she was communicating and what I am communicating throughout the show. So I want to start out. She says, in the management field, there's an age old debate about leadership that is often framed as the question, are leaders born or are they made? Now, I'm going to stop right there because I'm going to ask you that question again. Are leaders born? Do you believe that they're born or do you believe that they made? Now, of course, this is an engagement platform between leaders and Americans. So I would like for you to put your comments below if you're watching this show. Tell me, what do you really feel? Do you believe that leaders are born or do you believe that they are made? Let me know. Drop your comments below. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the first episode of the Critical Line Network, where insight meets analysis. I am your host and creator, IBK. Listen, y'all, this is exciting. Why? Because this show is all about leadership and Americans. And when you bring the two together, what do you get? All right, you know what you get, right? The truth. Because Americans have one perspective, leaders have another. But when you get it all out, the truth comes out. So, my show for today is going to start off with leadership, of course, because why? Leadership is important. And because of all of the events that are going on in our country right now today, why not start out with leadership? And the topic of today is going to be the cost of leadership. What does it cost a leader to stand up for the truth? That's today's episode. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Marilyn Mosby. I am not sure if you know who she is. Marilyn Mosby was the former prosecutor, top prosecutor, youngest prosecutor in the city of Baltimore. When she first began her career, she started out bright eyed. She was excited. She wanted to go in and she wanted to make change. That was her whole MO, make change, stand up for what is right. But what happens when you go in young, bright eyed, expecting the best, and it turns out to be the worst? What happens? This is what this show is about. It is about the cost of true leadership. So today's episode is going to be about none other than Marilyn Mosby. Now, if you've been watching the news, she has been sentenced to 12 months home detention, 3 years of supervised release, 100 hours of community service for perjury and fraud. And as you know, this has been a long journey for her. So even though she had a short term, it seemed like a lifetime for her because it all started when she started in office and she took on the Freddie Gray case. Now, if you know anything about Freddie Gray was a particular young man who stayed in Baltimore or Maryland. And what ended up happening is that he ended up getting arrested. While he was in police custody, for some reason, his spinal cord became unhinged. And a little bit, I guess you can say a few days later or whatever, he ended up deceased. So when he ended up deceased, of course, the Baltimore City and the people got into an uproar. Marilyn and her team decided to take this case on. That's when her career got into the spotlight. So today she's going to be the leader that I am going to highlight in today's show because I think this is no better time to talk about leadership and the cost of leadership. I am not sure how many of you are really truly aware of the Marilyn Mosby story. So what I did is I created an event line so that we can kind of go over a little bit about her career, a little bit about how she ended up from being America's youngest top state's prosecutor of Maryland, Baltimore, to being on the other side of the law. So what I did is I kind of created a little bit of information and um I want to go through this information so you can kind of get a feel and an understanding of where she started and how the loopholes kind of got her to where she's at. Okay. Let's start in 2015. So Marilyn Mosby rises to the public prominence with the case of Freddie Gray. Keep getting tongue tied with that. But anyway, Freddie Gray, who suffered a fatal spinal injury while in police's custody. Mosby and her team charges the 6 officers involved with his death. A grand jury indicts all 6 officers on almost all of the original counts charged against them in the Gray case, which was, I believe, one of them was called depraved heart um, injury or something like that. And what that means is that one of the officers was considered to have a depraved heart. In other words, they were so insensitive and so um I guess you can say non-emotional about this particular event that happened to this young man. So they charged one of the particular officers with a depraved heart situation. So I never heard of that, but wow. And I think the other ones was charged with manslaughter, some, and then some was charged with a second degree uh, manslaughter or murder. So, but anyway, the prosecution and the team could not secure the convictions for 4 of the officers. Now, this is a little bit later down the line in 2016. Um, the prosecution team was not able to secure 4 convictions for 4 of the officers. And they decided to drop the charges against all 6 officers. So from 2015 to 2016, she starts out prosecuting or coming against these 6 officers. These 6 officers were present when Freddie Gray was arrested. And when he ended up being taken to the hospital, he ended up, I think it was May when he was taken, May 2015. He ended up passing away a few days later. And when they done an autopsy, I'm trying to think of the person, but when the medical examiner done an autopsy, what they ended up finding is that he did not die of an accident or he did not die of his own accord. He actually ended up, what the examiner found is that he ended up dying of an injury that they said was equivalent to a massive car wreck. So they said it would have took massive force for his spinal cord to be unhinged like that. And that's when Mosby and her team began to look into the case and they began to say, okay, since we have this and other evidence, we're going to go ahead and take this case on. So that was not necessarily the beginning of her career, but that's when she got thrust into the spotlight. As I continue throughout the show to expound upon the cost of leadership and what it costs to be a leader who stands up for what you believe is right, I want to take note because I want to be able to relate this to not just leaders, but the American people. The reason why I want to be able to relate this to the American people, because I'm going to show you some research from a poll or from an actual organization about how many people who are in prison. So there's over 1.9 million people who are in prison as of today. Over 1.9 million people. Can you imagine? That's a whole city. That is a city, you guys. 1.9 million people. And as I was doing my research and as I was studying about her, I've been following her pretty much on and off for a while. So I heard about her, back in the day. I came across her. This is before I even known I was going to do this particular podcast and channel. So I kind of had been following her for a while. And because of some of the personal things I've been through and some of the personal things I've seen other people go through, that kind of stuck with me. Her story stuck with me. And as I would see her do interviews and see her talk to reporters and see sometimes things got twisted up, I knew then that she was up under some type of attack. I didn't fully know what it was about at the time, but I knew it was something. And I knew that it was something that wasn't right because she kept saying, I have apologized to you guys 1,000 times. What more do you want from me? And just I just knew it was more to the story, put it like that. And after doing a little bit of research and recognizing there are I'm sorry, not just 1.9, but over 1.9 million people in prison, it got me to thinking how many people are in prison because they're actual criminals, and how many people are in prison because they stood up for something, or because they went against the status quo, or because they fought for something that they felt needed to be fought for, and society wasn't ready for that. And somehow it landed them on the other side of the table of the law, just like Marilyn Mosby, for standing up for what is right. So we're going to get into this show, and I hope that it brings insight. I hope that this analysis and this breakdown of the prison system and a little bit of her story is able to enlighten the American people that I particularly notice for a fact myself that every bit of 1.9 million people are not necessarily criminals. I know that for a fact. I'm going to share some of the facts with you, but I know that for a fact. So let's continue. Okay, and as time continues on, Marilyn Mosby and her office successfully convicts 33 officers. Now, this is after the Freddie Gray case, because remember with the Freddie Gray case, even though they were indicted, all six of them, by a grand jury, unfortunately, those events didn't quite pan out, and they had to end up go ahead dropping the charges that they had against the six officers. But after that, she continued her mission, and she would not let that stop her. And what happened is that they had rogue officers who were basically planning drugs and planning weapons and upon the citizens of Baltimore. And when she looked into these cases, what she done is she said, we have to bring justice to these people, and we have to prosecute these officers who have been doing wrong. And so she and her team was able to successfully convict 33 officers in the city of Baltimore. Her office was one of the first to create the first conviction integrity unit in the state of Maryland, which this office in particular was able, and the initiative was able to open up reinvestigations into claims of actual innocence. So what they were able to do with this is that they were able to exonerate 13 innocent Black men, 13 who were innocent. Now watch this, who had collectively served 300 years in prison for crimes that they did not commit. In 2022, and of course before then, they were able to do many more things, but I just kind of wanted to give you a feel for some of the work that this young lady was doing. You know, when you're young and you're bright-eyed and you step out there and nobody really gives you the ropes, you know, you are tell you like, hey, watch out, honey. There were people who went before you and they went through some stuff. And you get out there and you're bright eyed and you thinking, hey, I'm going to change the world. This is what I went to college for. This is what I spent most of my years not being able to party all the time for, and have to test and have to exam, and I'm sincere about my career, and I'm sincere about my life, and I'm sincere about where I want to go, and not even realizing with the bright eyes that it may not end up the way you envisioned it, especially as a leader. But anyway, 2022, Mosby now finds herself on the opposite side of the law, facing a potential 40-year sentence. She is indicted by now, mind you, she had indicted these cops, and 33 of them she was able to successfully convict. Now she's on the other side of the law, and she's being indicted by a federal grand jury. Not just a grand jury, but a federal grand jury on the charges of perjury and making false mortgage claims or applications in the purchase of 2 Florida vacation homes. Now I want you to pay attention to something, because this just ran across my mind. These officers were running lives. Now, mind you, I want to stop for a minute, because I personally grew up in my hometown. And I had 2 officer friends, so I've never been against officers. But I've learned over time that there are officers that try to ruin your life. There are some officers, and I don't necessarily think it's because they're always serving a code per se, or they're serving a system per se. Some of them are, but sometimes it has nothing to do with that. Sometimes it's out of jealousy and hatred, because you have to remember the person who wears the suit is the individual at the end of the day, and they deal with all kinds of mental stuff like everybody else do. And so don't ever think that I'm against officers. I had 2 officer friends. One was by the name of Frank Fantroy. I knew him for many, many, many years. And then I had another friend, and I knew him for years. And so these 2 men, they were pretty much friends of mine. They would check on me and my kids and stuff like that, and they would make sure I was okay. And they wasn't a spying type, just to get in your business and probe type. Some people keep tabs on you, but they wasn't that type. They were pretty cool people, and I never had problems with them. But on the other end, I have to be honest, I've had problems ever since I was a young girl with certain officers in the earth. And so that's why this story touches my heart. And that's why when I look at over 1.9 million people in prison, and I want to stop and say this to say, I want to dedicate this particular show to a young lady. I never knew who her name was. I will never know who her name was, and I probably would never come across her again. But when I was falsely accused of something and I was thrown in jail because I stood up for something, I remember I met this young lady. And while I was in there, I was at the time, I was in performing arts school. So I was attending school as a performing artist. And I remember I had got called in for an audition. And I remember as I was going on the train in my hometown, these officers stopped. And I thought, and they was like, don't get on that train. And I kind of looked around and I was like, because in my mind, things happen on these city trains all the time. And in my mind, I'm thinking something happened. Was there a wreck or a fire? Sometimes these trains catch on fire. Sometimes things happen. That's in my mind. And I will never forget it. There were people downtown, there were people around. And the officers said, and it was two officers, one Hispanic, one Black. And they said, don't get on that train. You cannot be successful. It is not for you. And I thought to myself, what? I had never in my life ever heard officers talk like that. Now, I know about targeting, and usually targeting, people don't talk like that. They're not that open and honest about what they're doing. But they do target to try to make sure you don't progress or you don't excel. So I was shocked. And I was even more shocked at the people who was sitting around, especially Black folks, and no one said anything, and I was shocked because I was like, out of all the protests and out of all the acting up, no one has nothing to say. And I was just shocked that these men had got out of their skin and did that. Usually officers don't do that. But anyway, to get back to this story, that's just a part of the reason why this is important to me and why leadership is important in every aspect, in every arena of the United States of America, from the top to the bottom, to the corporations, to daycare centers, to everywhere you can think of. But anyway, she finds herself, Mosby, on the other side of the law now. So mind you, she indicted 33 officers in total and successfully had them convicted. And now she's on the other side of the law, and she's being indicted by a federal grand jury for making false mortgage applications for the purchase of 2 Florida vacation homes. I want you to see the difference. These particular officers were harming human life and setting up human life, and at times have killed human life. This particular opposite end of an indictment is for making a false mortgage application purchase of 2 Florida vacation homes. Now, in retrospect, or in hindsight, or whatever you want to call it, crime is crime. No matter what, it's crime. But you have to weigh the two. You have to weigh the two. You have to understand there's human life and then there's material things. But let's stay on topic. Now, after years of facing almost 40 years prison, Marilyn Mosby has been sentenced May 2024 to 12 months home detention, 3 years of supervised release, 100 hours of community service for perjury and mortgage fraud. Mosby and her team continues to petition President Biden for a full pardon. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of where she started, where her excitement came in, what her career was all about, and some of the plans she had in place, and some of those plans she was able to act out. And again, what it cost her. And I'm going to go over a little bit later in the show what it costs this woman to stand up for what was right. And when you're young sometimes and you're ambitious and you take the ship by the helm and you say, I'm going to lead this ship, sometimes that ship will go into sink mode. It doesn't necessarily fully sink, but it goes into sink mode. And during that time, I can only imagine how she felt as it began to sink, because you feel that you're not going to rise back to the top. You feel that this is it. I'm going to drown. They were going to charge this woman 40 years of prison. That is several decades, y'all. These officers hadn't dare been charged that. And this affected human life. But this is what they're going to recharge this woman out of retaliation. So I want to go over some information with you from the this information is from the Prison Policy Initiative. Again, it's called Mass Incarceration, the Whole Pie 2024. Prison Policy Initiative. And this is an article by Wendy Sawyer and Peter Wagner. Now, what I want you to do is just really pay attention to this particular pie. Um, Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are over, let's see here, let me count. You got state prison. So there are over 1.9 million people in total. Remember, they're saying over in the prison system. Now, let's break these prison systems down so that you can get a better feel for what the American system really, I guess you can say, I don't know, I can't even fathom this. But anyway, let's start with state prisons. There are 1,566. Let's start with federal prisons, 98 federal prisons, local jails, 3,116, juvenile correctional facilities, 1,323, immigration detention facilities, 142, Indian county jails. Now, who would have known, y'all? Indian county jails. That's crazy. 80, as well as military prisons, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and all of these are, and also prisons in the U.S. territory. Let me not forget that. So these are prisons in the U.S. territory. It also states that a system-wide cost of all of this generated together is at least 182 billion each year. Think about that, guys. 182 billion each year. My God. You see, I wanted to share these insights with you because Marilyn Mosby has a profile of 13 speakers who spoke on her behalf just past a few days ago, who stood up for her. And these are profile speakers who stood up for her and spoke on her behalf in court. She also had 14 civil rights organizations, pay attention, who backed and signed her in a petition. 58 attorneys to do the same. Think about this, guys. 58 attorneys. One person, 58 attorneys. My God. And over 40,000 people to have signed a petition to President Biden for her pardon. And by the way, that's still in process and they're still asking for petitions. Now, if you want to be a part of petitioning for her and pardoning for her, please go to Marilyn Mosby, and I may be saying this wrong, but Pardon for Marilyn Mosby or justiceformarilynmosby.com. Again, justiceformarilynmosby.com. And if I'm saying it wrong, please just Google it. The reason why I wanted to share that insight with you about the prison system is because how many of those people will never, ever be able to have that many people stand up for them, let alone one good attorney? 58 attorneys. That's a lot, y'all. 13 speakers to speak on your behalf in court. We're not talking about just anybody. We're talking about people who can make impact. The problem is that with these over 1.9 million people who are in the prison system, and of course you do have some criminals, and you do have to pay for the crimes you commit. But we know if you've lived long enough in this earth, you know how you've been intimidated, you know how you've been threatened to shut up. We know that some people who are in this system are not in this system because they are blatant criminals. and how many who are in the system for years will never have that opportunity. And I want to go back to dedicating this show to a young lady. Again, I told a little bit of my story in the beginning. But there was a young lady I met while I was in jail at one point in time in my life. And I remember the young lady looked me square in the eyes. And like I said, I was in performing arts school. And it was during that time when those officers said, you can't, be successful. It's not for you. And I remember being there. And when you're in jail, you don't get pens or anything like that. You get pencils about this small. And then you get little pieces of paper that you can write on. And I remember thinking that because at the time I had got cast for a play. So when those officers had did that, I was on my way to audition for this play. And it was going to be a major play in a major theater. And I remember going under attack. And I remember them saying, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. So it was like they already knew, right? And it tripped me out. And I remember thinking in my mind, I'm not going to get it. I literally thought that because of what they were doing. And I remember praying and I remember saying, God, I've been targeted for a long time since I was a young girl, because I have many other stories too. I just want to share this one though. And I said, I'm just about tired of this. All I'm trying to do is just better my life and do something for my life. And I'm tired of this. This is crazy. And I remember I went in after the prayer, and when it came up my time to audition, I went into audition. And I remember thinking I'm not going to get it because of the attack. And so I went back, and I remember a few days later, I got an email. And when I got the email stated that I had, of course, got accepted for the audition. I got accepted for the role, but I didn't just get accepted for one role. I got accepted for like 3 roles. And of course, I was excited. I was like, well, baby, yes, yes. And I was excited, thank you, God, or whatever. So for 2 weeks or 3 weeks straight, I went straight to audition. We had auditions every day. So I went to audition every day. And I'll never forget it. 2 days before the audition is when the officers pulled a false arrest. So I didn't get to attend my first major play. I did not get to attend it. But I remember they used to give us these little pencils and these little papers or whatever. And I remember I would sit on my bunk and I would write. And I encountered this young lady. And I remember she looked me square in the eyes. And I remember she said to me, she said, God has given you a second chance. She said, but many of us will never get a second chance. And I didn't know her. And I didn't even know why she was saying that to me. And I was just standing there, just kind of like trying to process, like, because I'm like, I'm in this place, I don't even belong here. I didn't even do nothing. These people just targeting me. And hmm. And so I dedicate this show to her. And that's why it was important for me to do a little research, not just come babbling, but to do a little research just to give you insight into these people who are locked up. Because everybody's not a criminal, sweetheart. We've all made mistakes. We've all done some dumb stuff when we were young, but everybody's not necessarily a criminal. And they will try to paint you a criminal. They have to. They can't just make it look like they was targeting you. So that's why I wanted to share that. And to that young lady that I will probably never ever see again, I hope you are well. That's been some years ago, but hey, that's what this show is about. It's about leaders and Americans coming to the table, meeting in the middle, and sharing the truth, and hopefully giving some insight into the world, so when people watch these things, they're able to think of some ideas, they're able to think of some better plans, and to act on those plans, and to make this place a better America, because we need it, and we need some great leaders. So, and we need better Americans too. Because, by the way, some of those Americans do it themselves. It's not just, the people who are in power. The Americans, out of their jealousy and hatred, some of them will literally fight against you and try to hold you down. So it's not me against leaders or anything like that, or people in powers of positions. We're people at the end of the day. So when you take off this these titles. When you take off your suits, and when you take off your as a prosecutor, you take that suit off. As a police officer, you take that badge off. As a clinical worker, you take that lab coat off. As a social worker, you take your jacket off. As a customer service person who works at Walmart, you take your badge off. As a person who works at Chick-fil-A, you take your hat off. At the end of the day, we really are humans. And when those things are done to us, they do have an effect on our lives, whether you want to admit it or not. And not only do they have an effect on our lives, they have an effect on generations. So that's why this show is important, because generations, we are facing generations. And if you don't change this 1.9 million, over 1.9 million, and we don't start looking at how to do things better, is it going to get better? So, again, I do know, with all that said, there are some great people in the universe who do awesome things. So, I definitely don't want to count you out. And keep doing it. Keep standing. Keep coming up with ideas. Keep being creative. Continue on with your initiatives. They're much needed. So I ran across a woman this past weekend, and we just began to have a casual conversation. And as we were conversating, I asked her, "What does she think about the Marilyn Mosby case, and and what the federal judge had to say, and how the federal judge sentenced her?" And she went on, and she had this to say, and I want to share it with you. She used to work in science, and she said, there is no way that you can work in the system and not either be corrupted by it or serve it. And I thought that was very, very interesting. Again, she said, there is no way that you can either work in the system and you're either corrupted by it or you serve it. She said, the system is so corrupt that there is no way that you cannot be corrupted yourself by the system. She said you either serve it willingly or you get out. And as she used to work in science, and she said she went on to say that she saw people doing things that she knew wasn't right. And she was like, I'm going to have to do this against my people. She was like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. And she got out of that particular field that she was in. And I don't know what your thoughts is on that. You can comment below. So if you feel that that's a true statement, go ahead and comment below. But I understood fully what she was saying, because at one time, a uh, I worked for a council. And in working for a council, they have so many programs that are out there. And you begin to recognize that some of these programs are vital and they're helpful, but some of them are damaging to Americans and destructive. And you make a decision in your mind, like, there's no way, I'm contributing to this if I stay in here. Once God give you an awareness and give you a conscience, you know, if you cannot change the system at that time, and you don't have the power to change the system at that time, and I wouldn't even say change the system, but make some change or some changes, there's no way. The only other thing you can do is serve it when you stay there. That's the only other thing you can do. And so basically, I understand what she's saying. And I also understand what she's saying by corrupt you, because when you try to stand up for right, your spirit is right, your ideas is right, you want what's right, but that doesn't mean everybody else wants what's right. And that system that you work with wants your vision or want how you envision things. And therefore, again, it takes us back to the cost of leadership. It takes us back to that place where, you know, what it really costs you to be a true leader. A lot of people look at leadership, and I'm going to return back uh, a little bit later to the quote I started with the dean at the Wharton University of Pennsylvania because I really want you to understand this. A lot of people think that, leadership is just something, or I take some classes, I go to college, I decide what field I want to go into, and, and I get these skills and I just go out here. Well, the world doesn't work like that. And the system that you're going to work for doesn't work like that. And when you get up in that system, you think, oh, I'm bright eyed if you have a good heart. Now, if you're going to sell the thing, you're going to sell the thing. But if you're one of those people, you got a good heart and a good spirit, you get to seeing things like your conscience is like, wait a minute, I got to do this. Wait a minute, and information begins to hit you and you like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing to humanity. And that's when you're at the crux of your career. And that's when you have to make a choice. Do you make a choice to stand up for what is right? Or do you make a choice to serve the system, like she said? So I fully understand what she's saying, and a lot of people do out of fear, because they have families to feed, they have lives to feed, and they say, look, it is what it is, and I got to make my living. So they on the side of serving the system. But I wanted to create this show so that we can recognize that we really can change things. You can't not necessarily change the system, but with all the entrepreneurship going on and with all the ideas and with all the creative endeavors, there are things you can do to help make things better. There are choices you can make. And I'm pretty sure after all that Marilyn has been through, honey, she's not through. That woman probably going to be doing some things. Um, but again, I just wanted to share this story. And before we close out today, I wanted to go over the cost of leadership. So I'm going to take you over a little bit about what it cost this woman, just some points of what it cost her. So let's go. So I was watching Roland Martin and I was watching his show, and he was doing an interview with Marilyn, and she stated these heartfelt words, and this was her expression. She said, "The attack was meant to break me. It cost me almost everything, but most of all, the effect it had on my girls." Think about that. The effect it had on her girls, and that it cost her almost everything. So we need to remember that when people stand up for true leadership, we really don't give people the credit like we should. Like, we're not really, as Americans, giving leaders the credit. We ask for everything we want. We want this. We need better leaders. We complain. We rah rah rah. We get into an uproar, and then when we get them, like they say, everybody looks at them with the side eye. What you do? Mm-hmm. What you do? You ain't no saint. But the truth is, when you stand up for justice, you're going to be penalized. You're going to be criminalized. Everything is not show business. Every leadership, and I've said this time and time again, you can be entertaining and you can have an entertaining personality, but depend on what endeavor and field you go into and what you choose to change in your lifetime, sweetheart, everything is not entertaining. Everything is not fun. Lights, camera, action. Everybody loves me. I'm a superstar. That's Hollywood, sweetheart. That's not leadership. Now you can have an entertaining personality. Don't get me twisted now. Some people got a very entertaining personality and they know how to entertain while they lead. But their function is not entertainment. Their function is leadership. Keep that in mind now. Now let's go over some of the things that this woman had to endure, y'all. Some of the things that it truly cost her. The cost of true leadership. Number one, it cost her marriage. Sometimes when you stand for something, there will be disagreements in your marriage. Remember, they were both serving at the top of their fields. He was being elected for certain things, and she was at the top of her field, and this caused a rift, and amongst other personal things. It cost her, number two, her finances. She lost so much. Her savings has been depleted trying to fight these allegations. Number three, it has cost her some friends. Y'all know how it is. You don't even have to really, y'all know how it is. Baby, you don't have to be in the spotlight. Just go through something. You call Sally. Sally don't want nothing to do with you, boo. She don't want nothing. Girl, I'm busy. Voicemail, you lose some friends. People talking behind your back. People distant themselves from you. Number four, she lost some family members. We've all been there. We've all been where your family can't stand the test of time, where your family turned their back on you. They were secretly jealous of you anyway. That's why they did it, but you lose some family members. Number five, respected colleagues and coworkers. How many people been on the job and y'all be at the table and you gossiping about something? You know how it go, y'all. You be gossiping, you talking, and it's not really gossip per se. It's just your expression because you sick of what's going on at the job. And so you all gather together and you have lunch and you be like, yeah, and we should tell the boss this and we should tell, because the boss is the leader, right? And we should say this and say that. But when it come down to it, none of that happens. And if you the one who takes the stand, none of them coworkers know you, boo, because they ain't trying to lose their job. Number six, see, we don't have to be in their positions to feel what they feel because we're human and we go through what they go through. That's why it's the concept of leaders and Americans coming together because we're all going through it, just in our own ways. Number six, sleep, health, stress, and worry. Ooh, y'all, come on, American people. Come on, leaders. You know that when you're facing 40 years, you don't know what these people gonna do with you for addressing 33 cops? Oh no, baby. That's scary, isn't it? How many of you been in a position on your job? You sweating bullets. You don't know if you're gonna get fired. You don't know what's gonna happen. Or you facing a case yourself and you're sweating bullets and you're afraid. You can't sleep. Your health, your stress, everybody smiling, everybody having a good time. You're not having a good time. You're worried. You don't know what your future holds. You don't have time to have a good time. It's depressing. It's dark. Number seven, your reputation and isolation. Reputation causes isolation. You know that. You know that. So when you're up under attack and the whole world's talking about you, and in your world, it's not maybe the whole world because you're not in the media, but it consists of your world. You know how people do. They don't want to be associated with the person that's, you know how folks, I don't want nobody thinking of me in a bad light if I'm hanging with them. You understand that, right? Number eight, heartache, pain, and confusion. We've all been there, sweetheart. No matter who we are, where we come from, when you take off the title of leadership and you take off the title of American, we're humans and we've been there, and that heartache runs deep and that pain runs deep. The confusion can run deep. But you know what I want to say about this leader? Prosecuting 33 officers who committed crimes against citizens was a bold, bold move. Don't too many people do that, baby, whether they black, white, or whoever. Don't too many people go that route. They understand that the police is a fraternal order, and that is a strong organization up under stronger organizations. And these police officers serve those organizations. And don't you think for one moment it wasn't an accident that the federal grand jury came after her. Don't think that was an accident. But you want to know why I wanted to highlight her in this episode. I wanted to highlight her because number one, this show is about leaders and Americans meeting in the middle and finding that common ground of not only do they go through it as leaders, we do too. And the suffering is heartfelt on each end. The only difference though is when you're a leader and a high profile leader, you have support that others just don't have, and that's why it's over 1.9 million. Not because there are just some criminals, but because there are people that just don't have that support. So it's my hope that you can somehow somehow step in and really find some initiatives and programs that will look at some of these cases and continue to look at some of these cases and to listen to some of the go back and listen to the original stories they were trying to tell you when they got locked up, because all of us have these stories, right? And they say, oh, everybody is not they say once a person get locked up, everybody claim not to be a criminal, but the truth is everybody is not. um, but what I love about her, Marilyn Mosby, is that no matter what this woman went through, you're right, they tried to break the hell out her ass. As a matter of fact, they spanked that ass. That's exactly what they did. And they tried to break the hell out of her. But the one thing she did not do is she didn't do what most would have done, and they call themselves leaders. She never, ever apologized for her stance on what she truly believed and what she stood for. And she stood, and no matter what they said, no matter the lies, no matter the misconstrued through the media, no matter how people wanted to put the narrative, she stood for what was right. Do you understand when I say true leadership? Do you understand that? True leadership. This lady stood. And to be that young to go through that and to come out on the other side of that. I want to go back to the original quote from the Dean of Wharton University, Miss Erica James. And I want to fully read that quote out to you. So now we can go back to, are leaders born or they made? I hope you put your comments below. And I hope you've really enjoyed this session, this informational session and episode. I plan on bringing you much more. I got some interviewees lined up and some professionals, leaders in their field, and people who are talking from their perspectives. So I want you to stay with this show. This show is going to be really great. But I want to go back to Miss Erica James' quote, Dean Wharton, the University of Pennsylvania. Let's go back. Okay. Let's start back at the beginning. In the management field, give me just one moment here. I'm sorry, you guys. So, in the management field, there is an age-old debate about leadership. Are leaders born or are they made? She continues on to say, as so often when it comes to people, the answer is not binary. One common narrative would lead us to believe that leaders are naturally bold, fearless visionaries with clairvoyance, with magical powers to see opportunities that others cannot. The reality is, this is mythical. The leader is just a myth, that type of leader. However, the academic literature states that leadership qualities and practices can, in fact, be learned and developed. And yet, she would argue that knowing leadership theory is not enough. The events, challenges, and opportunities of the last few years have led her to this specific conclusion. Leadership is not a title or a position or even a set of attributes. Leadership is a choice. Leadership is a choice. Wharton class of 2024. She was having a commencement speech. That goes back to Marilyn Mosby. Marilyn Mosby, whether you think that leaders are born or whether you think that leaders are made, Marilyn Mosby made a choice to stand by what she believed in the face of one of the greatest attacks upon her life. That, to me, is true leadership. I want to leave you with with this ending right here. And I want to say to you, this is more so to upcoming and aspiring leaders. When you start out on your journey, you're going to be bright-eyed. You're going to be excited. You're going to have all these brilliant ideas of how you're going to change the world, how you're going to impact the world. I want you to remember there is a difference between being an entertainer and a leader. Sometimes the call on your life may not always be the journey you set out to take, but it would always, if you stand for the truth, be the journey that will make you proud in the end. Never forget that. So, what is my opinion? Are leaders born or leaders made? I personally believe that two ends come together. Number one, when it comes to leadership and true leadership, most of the time there is a call upon people's lives to lead or to change something in this world. There is something that they are designed and destined to do. They just know it within their knowing, within their knowing. I'll give you an example. Beyonce once said that as a singer, as a true singer, there are certain things that people don't teach you. You just know. You just know. And that goes back to being a true leader. Nobody could have ever taught Marilyn to stand when all turned against her. No one could have ever taught Marilyn to not break, even though your marriage will fall apart, your finances will fall apart, your colleagues will fall apart. You would lose all these things in the process. And even though you felt like you were going to break, you didn't break. No one could ever teach Marilyn that no matter what, stand even when you're being accused. That's something that's eternal within the human spirit, psyche, soul, whatever you want to call it. And then on the other hand, in order for Marilyn to have become a prosecutor, there's no way to become one unless you go to college, hon. So skills are very much needed for leaders, but there are some things you cannot teach a true leader. I'm IBK. I hope you enjoyed this session where insight meets analysis. Stay tuned because next week I'm going to be bringing you some interviews, honey. So I enjoyed you. I enjoyed you being here. I enjoyed doing this show. And I hope with all my heart that there are some leaders that come across this and mothers who come across this whose children are locked up and they know that their children don't deserve that, and fathers and just different people, and realize that there are changes that can be made. You know, there's this old saying that says, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. So in saying that, if we as the American people and as leaders, if we think we can, then we can. So as we continue to strive to make change in this country, and please don't make it a race issue all the time, because believe me and you, if a white cop would have did that, they would have persecuted his butt the same. I mean, not white a cop, but a white prosecutor would have came after 33 cops. Trust me, they would have persecuted his tail the same. So remember that even though some things are racial and we don't want to take from that because some things are racial, I have to deal with that stuff. But all things are not racial. And keep that in mind that at the end of the day, we're human and they would have did a white person the same way. There are certain belief systems in our country where people feel you don't touch certain things, you don't touch certain people, and you don't touch certain systems, and you don't touch. And when you do, because you're standing up for what's right, you'll get penalized. It's just the way it is. You know that you tried to do some things, and you saw the way people came after you. So keep that in mind, and join me next week, Sunday at 6 o'clock. Okay. Bye bye.